for an FBI agent to tell one of our informants to furnish the ingredients for the bomb in '93 World Trade Center, to appear in the newspaper, and no congressman or senators or anybody does anything about it?
Well, not all newspaper stories turn out to be true. And
this came out in the trial.
Yeah, not
because he wore a
even,
body mark. He wore a body mark with
I
the
don't
terrorists.
know about this issue specifically, so I can't address it, and I would need to read up on it. But what I am familiar with is that I have done investigations of two FBI investigations. I followed two FBI investigations here in California, which connect with the Russian mafia. And in both cases, the Justice Department in Washington stopped, this was under Bill Clinton, stopped the investigations and did not want to touch people who were spies or Russian mafia bosses involved in bribing state officials here in California or trying to penetrate our security services. And the witnesses, they could get protection from the local police, but the local police did not have the resources. And, you know, there's something wrong at the FBI, I can tell you that.
One last question, and I won't belabor you on this situation, but I have a theory, and I'd like to hear what you think, that the downfall of communism in the Soviet Union and around the world was all part of a master plan and was disguised to look like there was a downfall, but it really was not a real downfall. I mean, outwardly, publicly, yes, they fell to pieces, but then we have Gorbachev coming over here giving lectures for $5,000. We have Reagan, of course, pussyfooting with the Soviets and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of felt like, it's again theory on my part, that this was all part of the master plan and it really communism is alive and well today.
Oh yes, communism is definitely alive.
But specifically comment about the downfall of the Soviet. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yes. Well, of course, this is well understood. And, you know, I've talked to defectors about it, and there was a book written in 1984 called New Lies for Old by KGB defector Anatoly Golitsyn. And he explained that there was this long-range strategy involving the collapse of the Warsaw Pact and communism that was worked out over a period of decades, and they had to do organization. And I work with dissidents in the Czech Republic and Poland. Okay, I have a lot of sources there. The governments are controlled by communists. The economy is controlled by the communists there. But they pretend to be Democrats, and they've got our Western elite completely fooled.
That's my point.
I mean, I have documented that again and again. And in New Lies for Old, written in 1984, Golitsyn outlines the future collapse of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Communist Party giving up its monopoly of power. He said it would all come from the top. He made 140 predictions in that book. By 1993, 94% of his predictions had come true in his book. Now that is amazing. When you write a book about what's going to happen and 94% of it comes true, and he didn't have any visions or anything, he just was an inside KGB guy who happened to know their methods. And then there was another defector named Jan Sena.
Which book was that?
That was New Lies for Old, published in 1984 by Dodd and Mead. And then another book was written in 1982 by a Czech defector named Jan Sena, in which he explained the Russian grand strategy and faking the collapse of the Warsaw Pact as part of it to disarm the West. He describes it perfectly in there, and Sena also was the witness for red cocaine. And there's been other defectors. I mean, Colonel Stanislav Lunev, his opinion to me was, yes, there definitely was a plan. And, you know, they've had some problems with the plan along the way, but they're still following it.
So my theory appears, yeah, that's right, I'm all through. Good. So basically my theory probably is correct then, is that what you're saying?
That, oh yes, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
The whole thing was orchestrated?
Yes, in fact, it was thought of by a committee in the Soviet Union in 1956 to 57 called the Brezhnev Committee. It was a committee that was headed by Brezhnev. It had Suslov on it. It had KGB General Nikolai Mironov and Marshal of the Soviet Union Vidi Sokolovsky. And these guys were to come up with Soviet Russia's grand strategy for the thermonuclear age. And that grand strategy had two legs. One leg was deception, Sun Tzu, which was totally relying upon deceiving the West. and the other one was to use weapons of mass destruction. The one would advance the other. The deception would advance the plan of setting up the mass destruction. And that's what we're seeing unfold today.
One more quick question. In watching the 911 committee hearings,
Yes.
I don't see Colleen Rowley up there. I don't see Keith Williams, the FBI people. I don't see the two agents from Chicago up there. What I do see is another cover-up, personally, in my opinion, unless they come up at the last minute. But the people on the committee, my report over there, that documents, the FBI had this information March the 20th of 01. My report was given to that committee last January, Lee Hamilton, and I personally called him on the phone and gave it to him. I gave it to 155 congressmen, senators. I gave it to the members of the executive branch, the President of the United States, okay? My informant is a former intelligence agent, very reliable, very credible, Michael Riconosciuto. He and I have been actively involved for years. We, in the 1980s, put away 5 contract killers on our own, just doing our own little thing, you know? But I see a massive cover-up right now on 911. I don't think the truth's going to come out through the committee. It's going to come out through meetings like this and through a conference that I just attended in San Francisco where there were 1,000 people. Phil Berg, the attorney from Philadelphia, was there who's suing the President Bush and so forth. So can we have your comments and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the government is so impossibly stupid. One of the things is that we live in a shopping mall regime. Everything is consumer-oriented. Everything is oriented toward our comfort and convenience. The problem is that that makes you soft in the head. And it has made our culture soft in the head. I mean, go walk into our bookstores, see all the books, and see the kind of things that people like to read. Look at the movies today. Look at television. Look at the garbage. And to think these congressmen, they don't read. Our skulls full of mush. You know, they can't. How many people can think critically nowadays anymore? How many people can really analyze things? You know, how many congressmen have you heard that are really articulate, really understand the issues, and can really analyze things?
Zero, almost zero.
They're just looking for the main chance. There's a lot of careerism out there.
Okay, listen, thank you very much.
Yes.
By the way, Mr. Nyquist, you should know that gentleman is a former FBI agent. Just in case you didn't know that.
Ah.
Chief of the FBI.
Well, then he would know.
Quite a bit.
He would
what
know,
What he's telling you about is the absolute truth.
Yeah, he would
know. This is what I'm coming to the floor with. Now, I am a former combat pilot candidate for the United States Air Force. I didn't make it. My eyesight. Went through METS and said, your eyes are bad, bye-bye. So I gave up on the Air Force. And I'm kind of regretting it because I would have decided a mechanic. Besides all that, let me introduce to you, and then I'll ask for your opinion on this, a third terrorist group. We'll call them the Illuminati, just for the sake of arguments. Many people have tracked logistically who they are, not specifically who they are, but their connections with the financial world, their connections with the communists, their connections with the Chinese and so forth and so on. And let me introduce you to a now deceased gentleman by the name of Albert Pike. Now, Albert Pike is a very important individual in Masonry, and more importantly, in the Illuminati. I believe in my research, okay, that I've done myself, based on texts and stuff of Freemasons that they've written themselves. This is from the devil's own hand, shall we say. Albert Pike put out a thesis for order out of chaos to lead to new world order government. Right? They intentionally, the thesis is create 3 war scenarios. We had World War I. If you look at the financing and all the logistics associated with that, you pretty much figure out where the money came from. To follow the money trail, you figure it out. Okay, that's what a lot of us have done here.
So you believe that World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II were all created by the same group?
Yes, because if you look at the Great Depression, there's something very important people miss. The Great Depression was not only in America, it was in Germany, it was in France, it was anywhere these banksters, Illuminati terrorist group we'll call them, were set up. There was a great financial depression. It was global. It wasn't just here. That shocked me. I had talked to people just for my own vindication, my own sound mind, to validate this. And I talked to a friend of mine that was in Sweden. He validates it. I've talked to some other people who are in Germany. They validate it. As a matter of fact, that's what Hitler used to get into power, was the economic oppression that happened from these Illuminati that ultimately led to the empowerment to Hitler and his promises of solving the problems. Now, let me continue on with this here. This third terrorist group has, in fact, on the dollar bill of our country, stated their intentions. It's Novus Ordo Seclorum. It's Latin. It's on the back of every dollar bill, sir. It's right there. You can't deny it. And the word, it's in Latin translated to English, means New Order of the Ages. So what we're looking at here, what I want to present to you is, I admire your patriotism as an American. And you're in the right direction on the communists. Don't get me wrong. We're not attacking that. What we're saying is, there's a third set of bad guys you kind of need to watch too. Okay, and these seem to be the characters that are financing and advancing China, financing and advancing Russia. What they do is, okay, they're doing under the cause of humanitarianism, which is the idiot dumbness that you talk about. But I'm almost finished. Through the World Bank, through the International Monetary Fund, these are the institutions that give the loans to like Mexico, wherever, and to Russia and China. And if you track back the loans that were given to Russia and China way back when, not even presently, they're through the IMF and the World Bank. And if you track who the World Bank IMF are, you would find out that leads to the very same financial elite that was discussed earlier by other individuals. So this is the logistics that we kind of talk about. That's why we kind of see this as the big picture, that this is ultimately a war of all wars, that it will be so terrible, so horrible, that the solution to the problem of war and individuality must be gone, and we move into a collective state of a one world government and stuff like this. What's your opinion? What do you think is something, maybe, what do you think?
I have really researched this, and I've strenuously looked at the evidence presented by people like Gary Allen and others, and I am not as yet persuaded that their interpretation of the facts is objectively true. They need more evidence to establish what their claim is. It's possible. There are all kinds of possibilities, you know, for what's happening, because we have vague notions of events because we only get very sparse reports. And it's possible to then reconstruct events in a way that supports a theory. We want to be careful not to do that. When you have a theory, what you want to do is look for evidence that contradicts it. That's a scientific method. And I think that's what we need to do. And I see an awful lot of evidence that contradicts the conspiracy theory that if there is an Illuminati, and there may be, and certainly there are occult secret societies and people who have a pagan agenda, I suspect that their power is not, they're not as organized. They don't have as many atomic bombs as Russia and China. Right. And I don't think Stalin or Mao were under their thumb, because these guys murdered anyone around them that they thought was getting the upper hand on them.
I agree with that.
So, yeah.
What I agree with what you're saying, that they don't have the nukes and they don't have all this other stuff. But again, these people are hidden. They do not want to be known. They're, in fact, they work through what we call Igors.
Well, see, the problem is that as a scholar, which is what I'm trained as,
yes,
I can't really discuss things that are hidden from me because I can't see them. And that's the main problem I have. I can only talk about what I know and what the evidence is. And the evidence is that the power that's threatening us, the efficient power that's threatening us, whatever else might be behind it, is Russia, China, and their special services, and their mafias and the criminal organizations they're allied with. Right,
and that's the military side. But I'm talking about the coup, the seductive side. Now again, I'm not against America. Don't get me wrong here. I love the Constitution. I love the Bill of Rights. I'm not against.
That's what we have to cling to. I think that I really do believe, and I think this will bear out in the next few years, that our government and our leaders are going to be wiped out, and that we're not going to have to worry about a conspiracy from the CFR, because nobody on it's going to be alive in 5 years' time.
Yeah, that's what I've been worried about too, that the Soviets,
Russians and Chinese are going to kill them all.
Kill
you know, some people here might cheer.
What about that second government, though? Couldn't they take over? That's underground, or are they going to take care of them too? It was reported during 9/11. There was an underground backup government, per se.
Well, yes, we have that, but you know what? They know where all the bunkers are, and we don't have our bunker system is not going to withstand this attack. I don't think so.
I agree with everything you say. The main thing I have is seeing our government is asleep at the wheel here. You have any ideas of how we can survive through all this?
Yes, and I think this is an important thing. Educate yourself. You know, if you read this book and you share it with your friends and you read the newspapers to see if the things I'm talking about aren't happening, if my description of American society is not, you know, our weaknesses. I describe our weaknesses. See, we're a very strong country, but this is happening to us because of specific weaknesses in our national character that are being exploited by national enemies. And if you can read about this and see that what we're seeing develop against our country isn't a perfect fit with this, and that the news events you're seeing don't fit together, then you can say, okay, Nyquist doesn't know what he's talking about. But if it is, arm yourself with information, put food away, keep food stockpiled, learn about how to protect yourself from fallout. There's websites out there. There's my website. There's radiation meters you can buy inexpensively. There's all kinds of things you can do so that you can survive and your family. And it is important. Wendy.
Mr. Nyquist, you mentioned in a telephone conversation that we had, and I heard part of your talk because I was doing other things. But you mentioned the suitcase nukes in Europe. I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah, the word on the street in Poland from my sources there is that the Red Mafia has smuggled nuclear material from Russia into Western Europe, including satchel nuclear weapons to be used against Great Britain, possibly chemical and biological weapons to be used against Poland, and a possible disruption in Dublin of the big EU meeting that's coming up around May sometime. And, you know, that's the word on the street, just like in Spain. And so these suitcase nuclear bombs. Now, this is my opinion, and I could be proved wrong in the next week, but we are being fed this information about al-Qaeda having nukes so that when nuclear bombs go off in our country, we will assume it is Arab terrorists. I don't believe it will be. I believe it will be the beginning of pink terror, and it will be Chinese and Russian commandos that will be doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Nyquist.
I've got a couple questions for you. Do you think that USSR separated into various states or countries for the specific purpose of having more votes in the UN?
Well, that would be one effect, and also having more embassies in the United States.
Correct.
Instead of having one embassy in the United States, now they can have 15 embassies in the United States, and they can multiply their spies in the United States. There's another benefit of doing this. If the Soviet Union were intact and a nuclear war occurred, American missiles would land over all of the Soviet republics. But now that all the nuclear weapons are concentrated in the Russian Republic, and any nuclear exchange, only Russia would be targeted, not Ukraine, not Belarus, not Kazakhstan, etc.
Are you also aware that we have closed down military bases in this country, Russian troops that are here already? There's plenty of them here already.
Well,
Czechoslovakian troops also. We also have German troops that are flying the AWACS around our borders. And what are they doing flying around there? Because Bush said that we need our guys to go fight over in Iraq.
Right.
Are you aware of that?
Well, the Germany is part of NATO, and whether we can trust them or not, you know, I don't know. But what's interesting is Russian Spetsnaz, when Colonel Lunev defected, before he defected, he was a colonel. He controlled 12 Russian nuclear weapons kept on our soil. This is 1992. He told the U.S. government when he defected about these nuclear weapons. The U.S. government was upset. They went to the Russians and they said, look, we have this defector. You're keeping nuclear weapons on our soil. And the Russians said, oh, that's something we forgot about. We'll remove them. Some days later, some weeks later, the Russians come back to the United States and say, okay, we've removed them all. No proof, nothing. I asked Colonel Lunev, well, do you think they really removed him? And then he looked at me like I was stupid. This is a stupid question. Of course they didn't remove him.
Have you ever heard of the have you ever heard of the School of the Americas?
Refresh my memory, it sounds
down
familiar.
at Fort Benning, Georgia. The Delta Force and Special Forces train South American troops to go down there and do our bidding?
Okay, all right.
To
Well, I know
overthrow
there's
whatever
I
country
know
we-
there's been, there was for a while counter cocaine training for suppressing the cocaine trade in the Colombian Civil War. And like a year ago or so, they started to allow them to then train, us to become more active in training and advising in the actual fighting of the communists in Colombia, which is a very important thing because if the communists take over Colombia, that whole country becomes a communist, part of the communist bloc.
Okay, I'm a vet, and I know many people that were in Special Forces, Delta Force, and I know people that were down there training them down there for that purpose, for us to use them.
Well,
as
I
our
definitely
pawn.
hope we can defeat the communists. I hope the Colombians can defeat the communists down there because it would be very bad if the communists, like I say, since communism supposedly collapsed, they took over South Africa, which is basically controlled by the ANC, which is a communist-dominated organization. They've taken over, the communists won the civil war in Angola. Jonas Savimbi was killed, who was the great anti-communist fighter there. And then they took over the Congo with its vital uranium mines. And they've taken over Venezuela, Ecuador, Brazil, and they're trying to take over Colombia. So the advance of communism has not stopped. Has not stopped.
Yeah, well, why don't you get off my back, buddy? I'm asking questions here. What we have is, you ever heard of a group called the American Patriots Facts Network?
No, no.
Yeah, guy named Ken Barden was the person in charge of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot of this things from him back in the early 90s. And we have Russian trucks down there on a base in the southern United States. I've seen pictures of them. They have the little red star, and they're made for spraying. They got spray nozzles sticking out in the sides of them, and they're there for the intent purpose of when they decide to go down the middle of our streets, spraying out this chemical or what, biological, whatever they're going to spray. That's why they're here, and they're on U.S. government bases. Are you aware of that?
I have seen pictures of the trucks, yeah. I don't know exactly what to make out of it. It's kind of interesting. I know that we acquired a lot of things from former East Germany and other East Bloc countries. I'm not exactly, I'm vague on the details now, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, that Al-Qaeda being responsible for 9/11, I don't buy that whatsoever. And why were the military planes that are on alert told to stand down so they didn't get up there and shoot those planes down when they deviated off their path, which is a mandatory thing according to the FAA regulations?
I don't really know that's a technical question. I don't really know that answer.
Okay, well, how about this? When the first George W. Bush was in office, he called for, this is time for a new world order. Did you ever hear that in the speech he gave?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What does that mean to you?
Well, New World Order was an expression that George Bush used to describe the post-Soviet world order in which capitalist democracy was going to triumph over the planet, and we were going to have this great world marketplace and free trade and so on.
Don't you think that might come from the fact that in the old days, the old world order was in Europe, now the new world order is in the Americas?
Well, the America became the dominant world power in 1945. Okay. So that's been going on for quite a number of decades now. And by then, in 1990, that already had been established for decades, that America was the great power.
Well, how about after the first Gulf War, do you recall hearing about the 4,000 Iraqi National Guard guys being brought over here to this country, 4,000 of them mainly? And they were put out. There was 2,000 of them were off in Oklahoma, and they were part of what happened in Oklahoma. Were you aware of that?
That 2,000 National Guardsmen were involved in
the special Iraqi people, the special troops they have. They're supposed to be the head honchos that guarded Saddam Hussein. He was they brought over 4,000 of these guys, and they were relocated after the first.
Yeah, I have read something about that. Yes, I have.
Okay, well then, some of those were responsible for training the so-called McVeigh, who was supposed to be the only lone bomber. Well, he was just another Oswald, in my opinion, because he took himself out for the cause of the Aryan nation. Are you aware of that? He was a part of the Aryan nation?
That Timothy McVeigh was part of the Aryan Nation?
Correct.
I was aware that he was involved with anti-Semitic and racist groups, yes.
Yeah, well, I'm aware, very well aware from, because I have the unfortunate circumstance of knowing a lot of people have been in prison, and they're also involved in the Aryan Nation, and they were involved in it. They've given me a lot of insight into this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
there is a very powerful racist movement in this country that is. When Timothy McVeigh was in prison, he befriended the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. And he told Ted Kaczynski, why should we be enemies? We should be united against our common enemy, which is the United States government. So it was a very interesting statement that, and Kaczynski revealed this in an interview after McVeigh's execution.
okay, I'm going to let this man behind me ask you some questions. I'll be back.
I'll make mine short.
Yes.
The Communist Party is still active. You
Yes,
don't
it
about
is.
it anymore. The
You know what
social
you know what the new communist slogan is? Shop until they drop.
Well, anyway, I have a theory. You tell me if my theory is correct.
Okay.
You don't hear about Gus Hall and Angela Davis running for president and vice president anymore.
Yes.
Because the communists got smart, and I think they infiltrated major parties, mostly in the Democratic Party.
Yes.
They'll run for Central Committee. I wouldn't be
Yes.
surprised if some of your elected officials, who knows, maybe even Kerry could have been a
Yes.
member of the Communist
It's
Party.
possible, yes. It's not
So,
unthinkable.
That's where the communists, I believe, really are.
Yes.
They've gone into our own government because we have American communists, and people are just ignoring that.
Yes,
fact.
absolutely, you're correct.
Yes, there is a Communist Party registered there in Washington.
Oh, absolutely. The
And in New
communists,
York,
and,
yeah.
and in fact, I was dragged to when I was in teacher education, my teacher was a communist. I didn't know it. She invited me to a meeting, which turned out to be a communist meeting, at which they were talking about their strategy, the Communist Party USA's strategy of taking over the Democratic Party by infiltrating its left wing. That was in 1983. And in fact, she later mentioned to me Bill Clinton's name as one of their heroes. So,
Thank you very much.
you know, I can't say, but I think there's a lot of that going on. Has been
As you
going
know,
on.
the socialists work with their fellow travelers, so that's why I find
Absolutely.
socialist groups work
Yeah.
with them.
Jeff, do you know anything about the potential of the Chinese space program? Because they did have a successful launch recently, and I've heard
Yeah.
that America may have stepped up theirs in response to
Yeah,
that.
I know
Is
the
that-
Chinese have had a lot of problems with their rockets, but obviously they're getting better and better, so they're making great strides. They
Yeah.
want to go to the moon now, they've announced.
Courtesy of Hughes Laurel.
Yeah.
When this-
Okay, just one more question. One
Yeah.
more question, because it's
Right.
already 10:44.
Yeah, I know you want to go home, and so do
Yeah.
I. I keep asking this question of people that keep telling me there's no more communism is dead. I
Right.
said, we had a Cold War, and usually in a war, somebody wins, somebody loses, right?
Right.
Now, World War II, Japan surrendered, there was a treaty, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't seem to find the treaty between the U.S. and the USSR.
Well, they were allies.